Subscribe now if you're brave enough to keep watching. It wasn't long after 24-year-old Jennifer Patterson moved into her dream home that things started to go terribly wrong. Her vision of a quiet, peaceful life in the countryside quickly began unraveling as strange occurrences plagued her new home. At first, she shrugged it off as nothing more than the typical creaks and groans of an old house. But as the days went by, it became undeniable. Her dream home was anything but. It all started on a quiet evening, just after Jennifer returned home from work. She entered the house, expecting the usual silence, but there was something different. It wasn't the sound of wind, nor was it the creaking of the house settling, no. It was the unmistakable sound of voices. At first, Jennifer assumed it was a neighbor, but as she walked through the house, it was clear the voices weren't coming from outside. They were coming from somewhere inside, from the walls, the rooms, or from the very air around her. But every time she tried to listen closer, the sound would stop. No one was there, but it felt as though the house itself was alive with whispers too soft to understand, but enough to make her skin crawl. For Dee, her mind raced. Was it just her imagination? She didn't think so. There was something unnerving about the house. Something ancient that had been dormant for years, just waiting for someone to uncover it. Days passed, and the activity only escalated. Jennifer had invited a few friends over for a housewarming party. She hoped it would distract her from the creeping dread she felt every time she stepped inside. But as her friends gathered, the mood shifted. One of her friends, a man she had never met, looked around the room and paled. "There's people in this house," he said, his voice trembling. Jennifer laughed it off, assuming he was joking. "Yeah, a lot of us are here for the party," she said with a nervous chuckle. He shook his head, his eyes darting around the room. "No," he whispered, "they're not alive, and they don't want you here. This is their house." Chilled by his words, Jennifer tried to push it out of her mind. But when he left abruptly, vanishing without a word, she felt the weight of his warning. Something was wrong, something she couldn't understand. Her dream home was beginning to feel like a nightmare. That night, as Jennifer lay in bed, she heard the noises again. But this time they were closer. A loud, violent bang echoed through the house, the sound of something crashing against the door. Before she could react, she felt a force shove her from behind, sending her tumbling down the stairs. The air went cold as she lay at the bottom of the staircase, gasping for breath. Something was in the house, and it wasn't going anywhere. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. What was it that had shoved her? Why had she felt the presence of something or someone there with her? It was in that moment, lying on the cold, hard floor, that the terrifying truth hit her. Her house was haunted. But little did Jennifer know, this was only the beginning. Days after the terrifying fall down the stairs, Jennifer's life began to feel more like a living nightmare. The noises continued. Each night, she would hear the whispering voices, sometimes faint, sometimes loud and demanding, coming from somewhere in the house. But it was always the same. No one was ever there when she looked. Then there were the smells. The lingering scent of Old Spice aftershave would follow Jennifer wherever she went, especially in the hallways and the bedrooms. Sometimes it would disappear, only to return when she least expected it. It was as if someone was following her, but there was no one there. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. One evening, Jennifer decided to explore the attic. The door had been slightly ajar for days, and it bothered her. Something told her to check it, but the thought of what might be lurking up there made her hesitate. With a deep breath, she grabbed the handle, pushing the door open. As soon as it creaked open, a chill swept through the house. The room was cold, the air thick with the smell of mildew. But then, something strange happened. The attic door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the silence of the house. Jennifer froze, her heart racing. Her dogs, who had been calmly resting downstairs, suddenly started barking loudly and aggressively, as though they sensed something Jennifer could not see. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end. The air felt charged, as though something was watching her from the darkness of the attic. Despite her fear, Jennifer climbed the stairs to the attic, her hand trembling on the rail. Her dog's barking grew louder, more frantic. She reached the top and slowly turned the corner, expecting to see some sort of intruder, but all she found was the empty attic, covered in dust and cobwebs. There was nothing there, nothing to explain what had just happened. Her heart pounded in her chest as she hurried down the stairs. Her dogs had stopped barking, but the uneasy feeling lingered. The house had never felt more oppressive. Jennifer knew something in the house was awake, and it didn't want her there. The worst part? She was starting to feel like she was losing control of her own thoughts. She couldn't sleep without the sounds of whispers in the dark, and every time she turned around, she felt like she was being watched. It was only a matter of time before Jennifer would realize that the forces in her house weren't just haunting her, they were tormenting her. And they wouldn't stop until she was driven to the brink of madness.
As weeks passed, the strange occurrences became even more intense. The once peaceful country house had transformed into a war zone of her mind. She stopped inviting friends over, too terrified to bring anyone into her haunted home. The activity increased, making Jennifer question her sanity. The voices were louder now. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were full conversations, like distant arguments or hushed, frantic whispers in the other rooms. And the music old, twangy country tunes blared from nowhere. The TV was always off, but the sounds filled the space around her like a ghostly orchestra. Jennifer knew she couldn't keep living like this. It wasn't just the terrifying sounds. It wasn't just the feeling of being watched, the scent of Old Spice, or the violent pushes that sent her tumbling down the stairs. It was the unrelenting dread that never left her, the feeling that the house was alive in ways that no one could understand. The breaking point came one night when Jennifer awoke to find a figure standing in her bedroom. It was dark, almost a shadow in the shape of a man. She could barely make out its features, but its presence was unmistakable. It was taller than her, looming in the corner, watching her. Her blood ran cold as she stared at it, unable to move, unable to scream. The figure remained there for what felt like an eternity before disappearing into the air. She could hardly believe what she had just seen. And that's when she knew her dream home was no longer hers. It was theirs. Terrified, Jennifer turned to her boyfriend, Sean, to help her make sense of the horror. But the more they uncovered, the more they realized that the house was haunted by something far darker than they could have imagined. Sean moved in with her, hoping his presence might offer some protection. But it wasn't enough. Strange things began to happen. Objects would shift when they weren't looking, doors would slam without cause, and the temperature would drop without warning. It felt as though the house was conspiring against them, pushing them to their breaking point. The tipping point came when Jennifer felt a violent shove at the top of the stairs. She was knocked forward, tumbling down the stairs once again. But this time, it wasn't an accident. It was intentional. Someone was after her. By the time they realized they could no longer stay in the house, it was too late. The force was relentless. The only way to escape was to leave. And leave they did. As Jennifer and Sean walked away from the house for the final time, they realized that the spirits of the past still lingered. The house was sealed, but the terror it held would never be fully contained. And as the doorbell rang 3 times on Halloween night every year, they knew the house would never truly be empty. If this story haunted you, the next one will keep you awake. Hit subscribe if you dare.